they would accomplish that. And we've laid out some clear guidelines in the bill without specifying exactly what the rules ought to say, the regulations ought to say.
So the regulations don't have to say a prohibition?
Well, they would in my view on certain activities, without any question. But how to do that, I think, is a far more sophisticated, requires a more sophisticated answer than you can provide in a piece of legislation. That's why we're delegating that with a clear authority and accountability to come back with rules in that area.
Do you intend to include auto lenders in the consumer protection agency?
We've left out specific areas like this because I don't want to be in the business here of carving out. We're talking about large financial providers, and certainly that could fall into one of them. But I'm staying away from trying to write what in and what's right out. We're trying to allow the agency itself to make some determination so we don't get in the business of picking winners and losers based on political clout, it seems to me. So I've stayed away from that in the bill.
Yes. Sir, it would seem that the Fed in this summary is given the power to determine the budget for the consumer protection.
No, they're not.
Agency.
No, they're not. Absolutely not. The budget will come from the Fed, but they don't determine that. That'll be determined by statute or other means. The Fed has absolutely, I don't know how I can say this more firmly to you. The fact that this institution would be housed, rented space in the Fed, does not mean it has one iota of authority over the operation, the budget of this agency or this bureau or division.
Can you address more broadly the concern you'll hear from some consumer advocates who say it doesn't belong in the Fed because they fell down on the job in the past?
Well, again, I've heard some. Actually, they've done a better job in the last couple of years under Ben Bernanke than was the case earlier. But certainly the earlier criticism was well-deserved. The problem is, in meeting the four principles, where can I achieve that independence? How best do you do it? I believe the independence of it, as we identified in the bill, the presidential appointment, the confirmation by the Senate, the independent budget authority, the rulemaking authority, and the involvement in the examination and enforcement are very clearly laid out in this bill. That's what I've been determined to do from the outset. We do it in this
Why not an
construct.
independent agency?
Well, again, I think you know the answer to the problem in terms of votes on that one.
Senator, can you
Yeah.
explain the appeals process on consumer regulations? Who would make that determination? How would it work?
Well, the presumption is the regulation goes forward. Now, there have been those who've argued that you could run into some conflict here with consumer protection regulations and safety and soundness. And I've yet to have anyone identify what they mean by that, but nonetheless, we provide here, if in fact there is such an issue raised, that we then, utilizing the Systemic Risk Council, which we have in place, could make a determination as to whether or not there's any validity to that claim. But the presumption would be that the regulation from the Consumer Protection Agency would go forward.
Is there a voter's threshold on the part of the council?
It would be a two-thirds vote. They require two-thirds to overturn it. Let me just see if someone else does. Yes.
Will you have a chance to speak to Senator Shelby since you put this bill together, and do you think you can reach a deal with him before markup, delay markup in order to reach?
Well, Richard and I talk all the time. As you know, we have a very close personal relationship. We're good friends, and so we talk not on necessarily on a daily basis, but I'll stay in close touch with him. Our staffs do as well, and he knows that door is open. Again, I thought his statement last week was a very positive one, and I thought his statements today were, again, very positive on how he identified that we were there. And his point about not letting politics get in the middle of all of this, I couldn't agree more. The job is too important, and compromise is important, not on principles and not moving away from what needs to be done to provide the kind of assurances and confidence that people need in our financial system. And so if we can stay on that track, as we have in Titles 1 and 2 of this bill, for instance, on the resolution mechanism and the too big to fail provisions here of the Systemic Risk Council that Senator Warner, Senator Corker have worked on, and where we have agreement, where I think we can get agreement on the derivatives section that Judge Gregg and Jack Reed have worked on as well, where Chuck Schumer has worked on, and corporate governance issues, and we've achieved a lot of closure in those areas. Those are all areas where basically we have what I perceive to be consensus on the bill. So there are other pieces we do not. So I'm still optimistic we can get to final consensus on the bill.
Senator.
Yes, I go, Victoria.
Do you expect to have all of your Democratic colleagues on the Banking Committee support this?
Well, I've talked to all of, I think all of them, I missed one or two over the weekend, and talking to them about where we were and soliciting their thoughts and ideas. And my hope is, again, that they'll be supportive of this. That's not to say that every one of them will agree with every aspect. This is a large, complex piece of legislation as it's proposed. But I've tried to listen to my colleagues. 1/4 of the United States Senate sits on the Banking Committee. 22 other members. And so I've got to be sensitive to their interests and concerns. This is not a decision where one person can make a determination without consultation of his colleagues. Let me add to all of you as well, and I mentioned time, and I know again this notion of delay and waiting a while. By my calculation, and some of you may have a different number, we have about 60 to 70 days, legislative days left in this Congress. If you exclude the periods of recesses coming up, the August break and the like, the assumption will probably adjourn around the 1st of October for the elections. We don't have many days left to actually get a job done. So there is a sense of urgency. Now, we've spent an awful lot of time over these last 2 years, and we have not exhausted the subject matter. I'll be the first to admit that. But you could go on for years and never exhaust the subject matter included in this proposal. But we do need to act. It's time now to make decisions, yes or no. Are we going to go forward? Are we going to do the things I've outlined here and suggested in this bill? I believe if the will exists, and I believe it does at this juncture, to get to yes, that we can get this bill adopted. I thank you all very much.